there's a lot of things we need to learn as architects coming out of university with the kind of levels of debt that architecture students have. It's just amazing.
RIBA seem to strenuously avoid giving advice on what would be a reasonable rate to pay an architect.
Yeah, that it would stop that race to the bottom.
Chris, thank you so much for coming on this lovely sunny Friday afternoon. And it's very exciting to have you here during the election, and you are standing as one of the candidates. But today, what we want to talk about is really your background and what drives you. So it'd be great to start with a little bit of how and why you started up Weston Williamson. So can we take it from there?
Yeah, sure. Well, I got a place at Leicester Polytechnic to study graphic design. I'd won a competition to design a record bag for Reynolds Records in Ilkeston, and that I thought graphic design was going to be my career. But then one wet Wednesday afternoon, I picked up a book which was published by the RIBA called Your Architect, and it told me, changed my life in a way. So I begged Leicester Poly to let me study architecture instead. The book described what an architect did. It was very comprehensive, but it majored on the social responsibility and the community, and the fact that you had a client, but you had to look after the greater good of the community, not just the client that paid you. And it sounds really weird, but I came from quite a religious family, and the vicar, when I told him I was going to study architecture, was really disappointed because he thought I might go into the priesthood or study theology. But in a way, the reasons I wanted to study architecture was the same reasons that he did what he did, which was about the community and the greater good of society. And it sounds very, so I guess it is, the older you get, the more you sort of post-rationalise your life as to why you've done things. And I've reread that book recently, and it still is very powerful. And it had great illustrations in it by David Rock, and it had a drawing of a man made up of all the words that, so like psychology and research and craft and all the elements that go to make up an architect. And I thought it encompassed all the things that I wanted to do.
So that drew you into studying, changing your course at university.
Yeah, best decision I ever made. I mean, I still love graphic design, and I still like looking at books with great graphics, great logos and things. But I think that there's Oscar Wilde, I think, said there's the two most important days in your life are the day that you're born and the day that you find out why. And I think, that book gave me, architecture's given me not just a living, but a reason for what you do. And I think a lot of architects feel like that as well. I mean, that's one of the things that amazes me about the profession, is everybody's passionate about their own bit of architecture, whether it's conservation or academia or sustainability or modernism, futurism. Everybody's passionate about that their reason why they do architecture. And in a way that's great. In a way it is like a sort of higher calling, but it would be nice if everybody always at the same time complains about not getting paid more. But it's partly because we love it too much, I think.
Do you think vicars have got the same complaint?
Probably, yeah. I mean, they don't get paid a lot, but they get a lot of satisfaction. I mean, you have to have... I'm not at all religious now. It seems strange because I went to church 3 times every Sunday from the age of 6 to 16. And I still have this fascination with religion. In fact, I've just bought an old church in my hometown in Ilkeston and converted it into a community arts centre. And I still have this fascination with religion. And in a way, I wish I did have that faith. I wish I have. It's something. There's something admirable about having a faith in something. And I think I have faith in design. I have faith that good design is going to make people better and healthier and nicer. But I don't have that faith in, a hand created all of this. I think, but in a way I wish I did, because it gives a lot of people a lot of comfort, but it also makes a lot of people angry as well.
And so you met your business partner there?
At Leicester Poly, yeah.
But you didn't initially work together?
We were put together in alphabetical order. They said, Williamson, you can work with Weston and for group projects. And Andrew, we have very similar interests, but very different skills, I think. And that's the reason why it's worked for 40 years. So it was a time of the mid-70s, the late 70s oil crisis. And it seems strange now. We're in the middle of another climate emergency. But in a way, that's what brought us together. I won a competition run by Tarmac for energy conservation called the InPlan Award. And Andrew won a more glamorous competition judged by Norman Foster for glass and glazing, to design a house of the future. So we've always had similar interests, but completely different approaches to it. Really.
But you didn't set up the company straight after university.
No.
You worked.
Yeah,
did you work in the same companies?
No, I went to work for Michael Hopkins, and Andrew went to work at Richard Rogers. But we both lived in Belsize Park, and we kept on working on competitions and bits and pieces in the evenings. And then in 1985, the RIBA had a exhibition called 40 Under 40, and we submitted all the stuff. You were allowed 3 A1 panels, and there was David Chipperfield and Ken Armstrong and Manda Levitt, Allsop and Lyle, Allies and Morrison. So the RIBA was very good to us in getting started. And when we went along to the opening night, Michael Manser, who was the president then, and his wife, who was a journalist, Josie Manser at the RIBA Journal, said, you should give it a go. So we weren't. My first salary was £6,000 a year at Michael Hopkins, which somebody calculated recently. It would be about 25,000 now, which is probably about right. What has changed is you could buy a flat for 3 times a joint salary. That's really changed. And we didn't have any student debt. I got a grant, not only got my tuition fees paid, but got a grant to live on, and had enough to buy Steely Dan albums, and it had money left over. Really, it was an amazing time.
Well, we're definitely going to come on to that question of what that is doing to the type of people that end up in the industry currently. My mum would have never let me study if you'd have gone into debt. And I know times have changed, but debt at that time was a huge thing. And because I came from this really small village, and I had a paper round, and everybody was saying, it'll be great when you can leave school and you can help your mum, And then when I told my mum I was going to leave school and get a job, and she knew I'd got a chance of going to university or polytechnic at the time, or at least getting a degree, she said, I'll never speak to you again if you don't go take this opportunity. Because she had to leave school when she was 15, never had a chance to study. So I have a lot to thank her for, because I think, when you come from a small village, everybody assumes that, it's in the East Midlands, which is why I'm doing this work at the church. Everybody, you leave school and you get a job. And I had a fantastic free education, and it's not like that anymore. And you're coming out of university with the kind of levels of debt that architecture students have is just amazing. I mean, it takes an incredible leap of faith to go through that study. And I think there's a lot we can do about that to make it more affordable, because it's putting so many people off, I think. Yeah, and narrowing the market of who goes into it.
Yeah.
So you got a job, and then before you know it, in 1985, you didn't have a job because you set up your own practice.
Yeah.
Can you remember that? Me and John have sort of had that moment of like jump. Can you remember that? And
yeah, well, it
how
was
felt?
really, we were really talked into it by just the enthusiasm of being selected. And there was an air of optimism at the time. And the RIBA were very helpful that they would, whenever there was a shortlist for competitions, they would put a young architect, one of those 40 under 40 on it. So even if you didn't win, you at least felt incredibly optimistic that there was an opportunity. So we were on a shortlist for the NAP laboratories in Cambridge, which was the first phase had been done by Arthur Erickson, and he eventually won the second phase, which is the one we were bidding for. But I remember we drove into the car park with our presentation boards, and the Sacklers were coming in by helicopter and getting out of the helicopter and going in. And you just felt as though that we can actually do this. You know, if we don't win this one, we'll win the next one. And we won a competition which we thought we'd made it. You know, you go through, when you're young, you think, oh, this we've made it because we've won a competition. But the job might only last for a year, and you've got to win the next one and the next one. But at least it keeps you going.
Yeah. It was interesting because I was, obviously setting up. It was a big thing. You managed to do that, and it's probably quite different from setting up now. I just maybe could take us through some of those experiences, good, bad, and ugly over the years.
I kind of look at them fondly, but I mean, it was incredibly stressful. And, I think one of the things that I'm most proud of is that Andrew and I have stayed together. There's only Allies and Morrison and Stanton and Williams from those 40 under 40 that are still together. I mean, Armstrong was with Chipperfield, and Amanda Levitt was with a guy called Powis, and Alsop was with Lyle. You have to decide that you're going to stick at it, I think. And it's hard enough having stylistic differences or project differences or whatever, but there were times when we just thought, we've been doing surveys. We were shortlisted for a job, Catholic Building Society in Victoria. And after we've been going for about 5 years, and we were surveying the toilets together, and we just burst out laughing because it was so desperate, we just found it so funny that here we are 5 years later, still measuring toilets, and the client came in and wondered why we were hysterical with laughter, but we were almost so desperate to keep going and not give up that it was just hilarious.
Was that at a time of recession or anything else like that? Or was
so when we won this competition, the RIBA, we didn't win the NAP Laboratories one, but we you learn a lot by doing things like that. We eventually won a competition for the Port of Tilbury headquarters, and it was 1988, 89. So we've been going for three or 4 years, and we thought, this is it, this is great. And we got the planning permission, we did all the working drawings, and then I think that was when we decided to come out of the European Monetary Fund, and the property industry just crashed. And we'd done all the working drawings, and it was just about to start on site. We were just about to go out to tender, and the client said, it's not affordable, and just stopped it.
It's probably a good time for the project not to go ahead.
Well, in a way,
you only lose money from that point onwards.
In some ways it was. So we'd been paid to do all the work in drawings, so we had a little bit of money in the bank, but we hadn't got any work because we were, there's only about 5 of us in the office, but we'd geared up to do this. So I love competitions. I know lots of people don't, but I saw this competition for Venice Bus Station, which Jeremy Dixon eventually won, but we got commended for it, and because it was Venice, because it was Italian, the Italian architect that came over from Hong Kong to pick the architects for the Jubilee line, and he was the main client, a guy called Roland Paoletti, saw it and came and interviewed us for the Jubilee line and put us on the shortlist for London Bridge. So one project stopping, which we might have gone on to have a career in commercial architecture, speculative or offices, didn't go ahead. So that, since then, we've got a lot of repeat business for transport work. And so you have to go where life takes you sometimes. But we did try everything. In the first 3 or 4 years, I mean, Josie Manser, as well as her husband, she was really good, and she wrote an article about us for the RIBA Journal. And I think when you're young, you can actually, people are more interested in you than when you're a bit more established. And we've never had the same sort of publicity, even though the projects we're doing are better. But she said, the best bit of advice she said is, where do you want to be in 5 years' time? And most architects have really no idea. It depends what projects come along. And she said, you can do your own projects. And you should, if you want to do a laboratory building or, just do it. So we did. We made up this completely fictitious client in Italy on a great site and called it a research laboratory, and it got chosen for the Royal Academy, and it got published in a magazine. And
real fake it till you make it.
And these days you can do that by social media, and you see things all the time. So in a way, young architects have a lot more outlet for their work, but then it's also a lot more competitive as well. So, but we tried everything to get work. We went to a laboratory on the strength of this thing in the completely made up scheme at the Royal Academy. We went to a laboratory exhibition in Manchester in the GMEX, and we just put our drawings on the wall. Everybody else was trying to sell microscopes and stuff. We were the only architect there, and a guy came up to us and gave us a job. Amazing. For English China Clays in St Austell in Cornwall. And again, it never went anywhere, but we did the feasibility study, we did the scheme design, and then they eventually, the premises manager convinced him to go design and build, and took most of our work. We never saw it again, but we were at least getting paid for what we did and having some fun. And then eventually we won the Jubilee Line project, and that sort of helped us get some repeat business, because I think having repeat business in architecture is a huge help.
And infrastructure, you're sort of counter-recessionary as well, which is helpful.
Yeah.
Because my next question was going to be, 40 years, you must have gone through, we've been going 10 years, and I think we've managed to get 2 recessions, so you must have had your fair share.
Yeah, no, it is. It's scary, but it, and then I mean, the last, it was 2000, the 2008, wasn't it? The global financial crash. All of our housing projects stopped, and we had about 20 people working on housing schemes, and all but 2 of them were redeployed. Look, the government decided to bring ahead. We got the Olympic Games, and so they decided to do the extension out to Stratford, the DLR extension. They decided to do the East London line, and they decided to do Victoria Station upgrade, because that was going to be a hub for the Olympic Games traffic. So the government often, when there's a recession, bring forward infrastructure projects to keep the economy going. So it's actually been a great business to be in. And also, engineers travel a lot more than architects. So that's why we've been able to win work abroad, by hanging on to their coattails. So when somebody finishes the Jubilee Line and goes over to Australia, because there isn't any more work in England, there isn't that pipeline of projects, we've done work for them, and it eventually ended up working in Australia and Canada and elsewhere. So it's not been the career that I thought I was going to have. When Andrew and I, if we were at Leicester, if we'd have thought we were going to do sort of more work, my friends take the take the mickey saying I've built more below ground than I have than Norman Foster has above ground. And there's probably some truth in that.
So no, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, it seems that out of kind of a lot of those challenges have come your kind of greatest successes. So it is quite interesting. So Chris, it would be interesting to hear a bit how, as the company grew from the smaller company you describe into the bigger company, the Weston Williams we know today, and how that worked and some of the highlights, and then ultimately the sale that's happened. It'd be interesting to hear a bit more.
Yeah. So we've always wanted to do lots of different kinds of projects. I think what's made the difference is getting repeat business from the transport sector. But I've always been keen to do competitions for different things as well, because I think that makes for a really vibrant office. You need different kinds of projects to give people a choice of the kind of projects they work on. So we won one. I mean, the reason I like competitions is because I like working to a deadline and I like the ideas. And as long as the competitions are well run and you don't have to do a whole stack of work for free. So the two competitions we've done the best in is one for Urban Splash, where Nick Johnson wrote a really great brief. And we came up with what I thought was a really interesting scheme, and we won it. That didn't go anywhere because the 2008 crash did for that as well. So I've been back to see what they had eventually built on the site, and it's one of those really lost opportunities, I think. And then the other one we did was in Boston, in America, for New England Biolabs. But we haven't had the same, which was a brilliant project to work on. But when it finished, you're left with the choice of, do you stay and try and build an office in America, or do you come home? And unless you've got some repeat business or you've got some inkling that you're going to win the next project, it's really hard to get traction. And you've got the decision of whether you want to stay there or not. Somebody has to stay there. But so. There's been incredibly highs of winning competitions, but then if you relax thinking, that's going to make our career, it doesn't. I mean, when you look back at any architect's career, you've got to win the next one and the next one, and I'm more all the people that I admire in life are not the one-hit wonders, although it would be nice to have a one-hit wonder. It's the people that have longevity in their career and keep going. And, the fact that Alex Ferguson won the title one year, wanting to win it the next year and the next year and the next year, and you have the organisation in place, and they keep tinkering with the side to bring new players in to make sure that's achievable, is an incredible gift to have.
Alex Ferguson is one of our business sort of icons as well, but for a different reason. Oh, right. So sorry for interrupting and slightly diverting, but I think it's sort of relevant, is that we, several years ago, realised that the future of the industry, or the future of our company, we want to build the city, design the cities of the future, build a company to design the cities of the future. So we need this diversity of thought that we didn't think was coming through the education system as it is, because you've got to start off with $100,000 debt. Yeah. So, at the same time, I just happened to watch the Alex Ferguson documentary, and I didn't realise that, all of that class of '93, Giggs, Beckham, Gary Neville, Phil Neville, they all came up together in this academy that he built, and he scribbled it all down, and so we sort of built an academy based on his one.
I think that's fantastic. I mean, not only so Tamla Motown used to do that, Berry Gordy with people like Stevie Wonder and Marvin Gaye, and they it was a production line. Everybody knew their role, everybody had a task, and everybody was brilliant at what they did. And the great thing about that team was they weren't actually that, with the exception of Scholes, that Beckham and the Neville brothers, they were pretty ordinary players in a way. But they could do certain things well. And I think I've learned a lot from sport and business in architecture, and I'm surprised that more architects don't, because it's although we're taught to design, at schools of architecture, but we were not given any inkling about how to run a business or how to put people together to form a team. And I think that to me, that's really exciting. And I've got as much joy out of running an office and seeing a youngster join us and then progress, even if they go somewhere else and have a great career, than I have from the projects that we've done. I think that's part of being an architect, is to run a business and to nurture the people that you've got and to watch them do something.
Aside from that nurturing of talent and personnel, leadership, team management, what lessons would you give to other people, younger architects, about running a business? The sort of the business side of it. Take away the HR personnel side. What have you? What are the challenges? What are the things that are the most tricky? Architects are criticised often for being bad at business. I think, rightly or wrongly. What would be your sort of
one of the best things I ever did was after I left Michael Hopkins, and so when Michael Manser suggested we set up on our own, I enrolled on a project management course and did a master's degree, which was 2 evenings a week, and a part-time master's degree. And that not only gave me the skills to actually do the tender for the Jubilee line. If I hadn't have done that, I would have never have been able to fill in all the spreadsheets, do a health and safety quality management plan and all the things. Also got some great help from people like Ron Heron and Ian Ritchie, who'd also just won one of the other stations, and they gave us some advice as what to do. And I think that if anybody ever asked me for advice, I always try and help. And I think people don't ask; they're afraid of help asking. If you don't ask, you never know. And if you phone up and say, "You've just won this project, we're being shortlisted. How do we do it?" Both of them just say, "Come in and I'll show you what we did." And they were great. So this project management master's degree was partly project management, but half of it was property development. And so some of the other people on the course were project managers or surveyors. There was only me and Morley von Sternberg, who eventually became a great photographer. Decided not to continue doing architecture and is now one of the best architectural photographers there is. So I got a lot of contacts from that, and we got one of our first projects from that for a Saudi Arabian prince who wanted his flat refurbishment in a house in Rutland Gate. So it's very, how you get work, you have to try lots of different things, I think. And I think that's probably as true now. And there are a lot more opportunities now, but then there are a lot more competition as well.
Because I do think that's a bit of in your career and in your history, there's a bit of a commonality there of you slightly stepping outside just the architecture silo and bringing in different people, coming over to the engineers, property, looking at the other professions within the built environment. And I was wondering, did that feature in your sale and exit in the end, and how did that all come together?
So because of the kind of work that we've been doing after the Jubilee line, we worked on the DLR, we worked on Victoria, and we started working abroad. We've had approaches over the last sort of 10, 15 years of people saying, would you either join us, either engineers or other architects, saying you've got a specialism. And I think having a specialism can be a great help. It's nice doing lots of different projects, but we've found over the last 5 or so years that we've kept quiet about the other projects that we've done because people see us as specialists, and it's actually been a great help to have that. So some of the engineers we've spoken to and went around their offices, and there didn't seem to be a great deal of synergy, and you'd just be sort of sacrificing everything you've built to be part of them, really. But when Aegis approached us, they'd just written the 2050 sustainability plan for Paris. They're into sustainability And they sold us a vision that they were going to require specialists, architects. So we would be the transport specialist, the sports stadium, health, education, all the aspects that make up a city, a community. And then they would add the engineering and the sustainability aspects to it. And so far, it's working really well. And we've got the same autonomy as we had, that we're still running the business as we were. Obviously not naive, that could all change if if we don't do what they are expecting of us. But at the moment, it's working really well. And I think my advice to anybody that's looking at that, because I think how you hand over the business to a new generation, again, that's always been something that's fascinated me. And I've seen it happen with people like Shepherd Robson, Covell, Matthews, Wheatley, all those big names, Collins, Melvin Maud, York Rosenberg, whatever. When the original partners retire, that had the drive and the desire to actually build something, how you hand that over to the next generation. Sometimes it can be unedifying, and I've seen people being pushed out the door by the junior partners. So some people do it too early, some people do it too late, but it has to be done at some stage if you want the company to survive to another generation. Yeah. And there's lots of different ways of doing it.
Yeah, I can't wait. We've got a while to go yet. So I think we touched on it previously, but there are a number of challenges in the industry, and the one at the top of my list is, I suppose, like diversity is a bit of a broad term, but because of the cost of the course, there is, I suppose, a lack of the industry doesn't lend it, or it's not advertising itself to. So we work with lots of schools in Hackney and Tower Hamlets, trying to say, look, architecture is a really interesting career path. One, I don't think architecture is doing much to advertise itself to those type of people, or to anyone really. It doesn't feature on the school curriculum. And secondly, whilst there are routes in that don't cost as much as £100,000, the traditional route does now. That's got to be a challenge, and I know that you can't campaign for what you will do if you are elected RIBA president. So we should make sure that we're being clear to you that we're not asking you that. But what are your thoughts around the challenges in the industry?
I think it's always been the same. I mean, I came from a working class background, and architecture was never suggested to me. The professions weren't something that you were suggested if you didn't speak properly, or you didn't. No, I don't know. I'm not stupid, but I knew when I picked up this book and that described everything that I wanted to do to me. I went back and said to my careers advisor, why can't I be an architect? And they kind of said, well, it's not for the likes of you, sort of thing, because it's really weird. But I think there's still a lot of that. There are things that working class kids aren't encouraged to do. And yet when if they come to our office and they sit down and they are captivated by the models and the whole approach, and they love it. And I think how you can then get them to study. And because everybody knows it's 7 years, and actually 2 years of it is being paid. And if you got paid for the 4 years of it rather than 2, and there were different routes. So one of the things I would like to do, if I get the chance, is to make different routes available into architecture. So there has to be some sort of communal learning, whether that's a degree course, or or you could do that as an apprentice. So we've got 2 people in our office straight from school, and then to have different routes. And I would like to really revolutionize the lifelong learning. So you can do modules, and it adds up to being an architect. You do your part 3 when you want to, really, these days there are so many specialisms within architecture that if you did the modules properly, and I've spoken to academic institutions and also private providers that do the same for other professional industries. And and for Aegis, incidentally, we have to do modules on things like ethics and computer compliance and all sorts of things in order to get paid. So you have I don't think anybody has got paid, but you have to do the modules, and as long as they're entertaining and fun, I think that's the way to go. I've just done a BREEAM course because I went around some of the steel and glass buildings that are being put up in the city, judging the City Building of the Year award, and I was fascinated about how they can be described as BREEAM excellent. So I did the course to find out, and once you do the course, you know how you can you put loads of bike stores in the basement, and you suddenly can build everything out of steel and glass. I mean, it seems bonkers, but that's the way.
BREEAM's the wrong taxonomy. Like, we're doing quite a lot of work on ESG taxonomies, and part of doing that is you realise BREEAM is not the correct. If the question is how do you solve problems to do with 2050 transition to net zero, the answer is absolutely not in the BREEAM matrix. It's just miles off.
Weird, but that's where we are, and developers aren't going to do anything. Some of them will, but even we've worked for clients that have won Client of the Year award, and trying to get them to do something over and above what they need to do is quite difficult. So as architects, we do have challenges to convince our clients to do something. So, but I keep banging on about lifelong learning, and I did a LinkedIn poll to say, what would you want the president of the RIBA to do? Lifelong learning doesn't actually feature very highly. So
sounds hard.
But I think people don't understand why I'm going on about it, and the reason is that it ticks so many boxes. If you get it right, it'll increase diversity, it'll increase access into architecture, it'll allow you to have specialisms within architecture, and we will be able to prove to politicians and to clients and decision makers that they should choose an RIBA architect, because an RIBA architect is actually better qualified. And that's the reason why people would join the RIBA, is because it at the moment, I think 90% of people join the RIBA because it's a nice crest. I actually think we could get thousands and thousands of members from around the world and create a global community if we had lifelong learning modules that were appropriate for that community.
I think it's a really important point, because one of the things that's been changing the industry, there's obviously loads of new legislation like the Building Safety Act and everything else, and actually many practices have sort of struggled financially, and you've seen some names like Hex Plus, Sarah Wigglesworth Close, they're all architects that we respect and kind of like. So how have you found that challenge, and actually is there some opportunities in there? Because with our programme on the BSA Building Safety Act, we're having to do loads more work on making sure the competencies are recorded and the training. So although it's a challenge, it's actually an opportunity potentially. So I'm interested to hear what you think on that. People are complaining that it's expensive. You're having to become a principal designer to do all the things that traditionally we've done as an architect, and we're having to pay 400 quid in order to do it. And that irritates a lot of people. But I think I've always looked at the advertising industry, and because I think to be a sole practitioner, you've got to be good at so many things. That the advertising industry has a creative team, and then has an accounts team, and they're sort of in a way different sides of the brain. And I think that again, going back to putting a team together, I think if you need people that do different tasks, and the technical side of architecture is becoming so complicated that you almost need lots of different people with lots of different skills to have a good team. We've done that. I mean, we've set up a dedicated technical team because it's just the number of different things that are coming in. But how has that sort of affected you guys? One of the worries of you get great young people into the industry, but is there going to be a financial viability for firms in the future?
Well, one of the best things I did about 8 to 10 years ago probably was when Loughborough University started their business school. I got two graduates in, and they sort of transformed the office, because what we were finding is when the projects get bigger and the client says, can you look at doing our garden as well? And whoever's working on it will just do it. So you go around and you look at, why are you doing that? So, well, the client has to, are they paying you any more to do it? Because we're not, that's not part of what we're supposed to be doing. So, well, I just thought I'd do it. How long have you been working on? Oh, you've been doing, so
6 weeks.
Yeah. So what these guys do is they just looked at the contract and see what we're supposed to be doing, and then making sure that people did. And also, some of the architects were getting behind with the work that they were supposed to be doing, because they were doing what the client would ask them to do. Everybody loves designing, and nobody really wants to say, yeah, we'll design it, but we want some more money. So I think there's a lot of things we need to learn as architects. I mean, the RIBA client survey every year, the clients are usually satisfied with the designs they get. They think we're great designers, but a lot of them aren't satisfied with the way that we run projects. Yeah. And I think there's a lot we need to improve on. And there's a lot the RIBA can help, because if you're a big office, you have a business team, you have a finance team, you have a sustainability consultant, which is spread across all your projects, so that know all the latest regulations and trends. If you're a sole practitioner or a small practice, you need that help from the RIBA, I think. And it's somewhere that you can either ring up or go to and say, what should I be doing with this? What are the main things? And I think that's the sort of thing you should be paying your membership.
So one of the things that I think that RIBA could really help with, and because I think that there is an issue with fees in the industry, I think that's all recognised quite widely. And it's not just that we love design and therefore we'll give it away for free. It's that additional responsibilities such as BSA, such as the old permitted development, the old PD role, CDM PD, is getting lumped in. So nobody quite understands it, but you're doing that anyway. So you get this increase of responsibility where the fees stay static. The RIBA does have an opportunity, it is the mouthpiece of our industry, to just tell clients, look, this is a new thing and it has a separate fee. Your architect will still do it, but you need to pay them additionally for it. Yeah. And also, I know that the good old days of the fee scales, it was never existed in our lives, but I'm not suggesting anybody should bring them back. But RIBA seemed to strenuously avoid giving advice on what would be a reasonable rate to pay an architect for a development project, for a domestic project. It's within their gift to be telling people, and then you could at least say we could refer back to it and say, look, here it is, it's written. You can compete within this boundary, but you're well under the RIBA advised pay scale on that.
I think the kind of projects that we do, we're for a lot of schools, a lot of housing, a lot of infrastructure work, a lot of government contracts. You're not really competing with architectural technicians. The government does realise you need an architect, but then they are. One of the simplest things the government could do is just to never take the lowest tender, and that would stop at a stroke. People thinking, right, the fee should be 5 million. I've worked it out; it should be 5 million, but I'm actually going to do it for 2 because I need the work. Yeah. But if they had a simple system in place, like never taking the lowest, you always took the next lowest, that it would stop that race to the bottom. Or you could do it like if it was within 10% of the lowest or something.
But if it's 50% lower,
we've had situations where you're undercut and they can't do it for that, then they're just praying that there's going to be loads of variations that they can make their money back on, and that's just ridiculous. And I think if you're going to have a professional institution, you've got to have some teeth, and you've got to have more influence as well, to be able to go to politicians and say, look, I can see why you want to do this, but there's an element where it just becomes untenable, and you're not going to get the right answers if you continue this way.
And so, not just to politicians, but to clients,
Well, I think politicians for the government contracts, but clients for the private work. And I think, most people only build once or twice in their life, which is why it's always difficult to get repeat business. But we have to increase our skills and our negotiation. When I first got involved with the RIBA, it was when David Rock asked me to sit for council. One of the things we were going to do, and I usually carry them around with me, we went to see this advertising agency called Collett Dickinson Peers, which aren't around anymore, but they were fantastic. They were going to do a advertising campaign, say, why choose an architect when you can choose an RIBA architect? And the reason is that we're better because this is what we do. And it wouldn't just feature the Bloombergs of the day. It would feature good, ordinary, everyday architecture that wins the regional awards and things. And I judged the regional awards recently, and I was bowled over by the respect that most of the clients had for their architects. And they'd spent a lot of money. Some of them had spent more than they'd wanted to, because a lot of the projects had been built during COVID, and the suppliers were in short, and everything rocketed. But every client we talked to was so pleased with what they'd ended up with. Do you think, and that was quite reassuring as a professional.
Do you think there's a role then for sort of protection of title, or what's your take on that kind of discussion?
It would be nice, but I kind of think that ship has sailed.
No, the BSA is bringing it back. The BSA, we're running towards it rather than running away from it, because it's protection of role. Protection of title is irrelevant. Call me what you want, but there's only one person that can fulfill the role now on a project. The legislation is reasonably clear that the architect needs to be the principal designer, and they need to be a qualified architect.
I'm sure the surveyors will try and
I think they might try, but on most of our experiences, that the project managers don't want it. Yeah. They realise they don't want it, and they're like, it has to be you, architect, and there's nobody else that's going to be doing it. The building control inspectors aren't allowed to do it. It's protection of role for architects if we run towards it. Yeah. If we embrace it with lifelong learning, you can't just wake up tomorrow and do it. It's complicated, but with the right training, it's an opportunity for the industry to take back control. Yeah,
no, it is. If you can get that function back, and
you get to advise the client whether their team is competent or not. You know, that's like so much more power than you had before. And if you're you get to tell your project manager, you get to tell your client if you think your project manager is competent. Yeah. You get to tell your project manager if you think the fire consultant's competent. Like, this is control that we have not had. In our lifetime. Yeah, of being
it's a backdoor way through the principal designer.
It also comes to common sense in a way. If we are really meant to be leading design, we should be, always were probably thinking about fire and other things, but it's trying to get that. And it's bringing together in my mind a couple of the different things with kind of like role, finance and the RIBA. And you're talking about lifelong learning, and it's like, how can we actually get the RIBA to support architects? And I find that the education offer isn't that great. And there's talk of the new facilities that RIBA, I think you've got some questions on that, Ollie. But it's just like, how could we be championing, quality of design and as a profession through the RIBA and other institutions? Yeah, well, so at the end of my project management master's degree, I had to do a dissertation, and my title of my dissertation was why the architect's the best person to be the project manager. And all the surveyors on the course thought it was stupid. But we do have that broad training. We do know how to put the team together and who does what, and we do appreciate the role of design a lot more than But a lot of the jobs that we work on, the project manager is an engineer or a surveyor or a trained project manager. But there's no reason why. I think
those sorts of skills should be taught. There's probably too much repetition in the final 2 years of postgrad, rather than the other skills that we need to actually do the job.
Industry, yeah, I totally agree, because they often come out not very well understanding of the industry and the different professions.
And then you end up doing the part 3 to try, and that is practice based. So I think, I think part 3 again should be, it would take the stress out of the part 3 if you were able to do it as a series of modules, so that you can do them, and if you fail them, you just go back and do them again. That's the way people learn, I think. And
then build on that, and we're kind of calling it our part 4 or whatever, but kind of as you go through your career, doctors and others kind of have more. It's becoming more formalised, but that's what we kind of think we need to be doing.
Yeah.
So we touched on the RIBA's HQ plans. I saw you've written publicly that you've got some thoughts around their commitment to spend £85 million.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a fantastic building. It's wonderful, and it does need some work doing to it. But I'd like to see the business plan of how it's going to work for the profession. Are you going to get the footfall? Is it in the right place? All the things that we would look at if we were looking at an office. It's a lot of money to spend without more information. So that I know people are committed to it, and there's a lot of, but I also think the kind of questionnaires that have been sent out and the kind of information that I've been to the exhibition there, and it doesn't answer the questions that I have about it, and we've made some of the property deals that we've done. I mean, when Margaret Thatcher abolished the fee scale, she said, well, because when I was studying with Andrew, you weren't allowed to be a property developer because it was a profession, so you weren't allowed to dabble in property. But then when she got rid of the regulation, and you could charge what you like, one of the sort of offers where you can do some property development. So, and Andrew and I bought a site on Tower Bridge Road, which we'd been passing it when we were working on the Jubilee line. And it was a fantastic investment, and it was our office for 20 years.
Oh yeah, we used to work at Archetype, so we were just around the corner.
Walk up and down past it, I remember.
Yeah, and that was great. So I have some knowledge of property, and I would there are questions that I would like to have answered about 66 Portland Place. And I haven't been convinced yet that spending that much money is going to, what are we going to end up with, and where is it going to get the profession? Not just architects in London, but in the regions. How's it going to work for and overseas as well? What's the money actually going to be spent on?
Yeah.
So I think, I'd like to see those questions answered.
Yeah, I understand. I have a few concerns about that, but I think kind of drawing that round to kind of looking forward, I guess the question for what that building is, it looks forward to what's the future of the profession. And I think, for me, to end on a positive note, it would be interesting to hear your thoughts about the role of the profession in the future, and what's needed now that lots of things are changing, as we've talked about, and also we haven't even gone into technology and all of that side of it. So what's your kind of thoughts for the future profession?
So a couple of nights ago, I hosted an event at the RIBA, which was on artificial intelligence, and there was 2 speakers, both came over from California. And AI is incredibly scary, but incredibly exciting as well, and it could go a number of ways. And when I look at how the technology has changed from having a drawing board and rotating pens at Leicester to what it is now, and then you look at what's about to come around the corner, and on the one level, everybody could be an architect, anybody, any member of the public, will be able to use Mid-Journey to develop a design and then mess around with it and say that's what I want, and then they will be able to probably get that built if they then translate it into Revit or whatever, and that's quite scary. So I think we need to look. I mean, we as well as solving the problems we've got at the moment, we also have to anticipate the problems that we're going to have in the future, and regulation of title and all of that. If anybody can do it, because you can scan in or draw in your kitchen. So I've got a 10x5 extension at the back of my house, and I want it to look like this thing, and just scan in the picture, and you get amazing results. So I think, but having said that, I think it is incredibly exciting, and I don't think, I mean, from what the Professor Stuart Russell was saying from Berkeley, is it's never going to be creative. The way that it works, because it's working on a circuit, it's never going to be able to do the creative things. It can design you a kitchen extension, but it's not going. As architects, we have to try and stay.
It's not going to talk to the neighbour, is it? And it's not. There's a lot of other things that you have to consider.
And I think, but that's what we've got to get better at, is all the empathetic side that AI isn't going to have, and we have to get better at that. But I think, creating a global community in order to, because the problems that there are in India and Africa about urbanization and sustainability, they need help from us. And when I was vice president on the international committee at the RIBA, they're desperate for that help, and they think our CPD program is great. I don't know why, but they think we can, they want to be part of that, and I think if we're pushing it an open door to create a global community in order to solve some of the problems that we've got.
Shouldn't that then be what the RIBA headquarters is for? Is this kind of global research on kind of sustainable design and like technology?
To be fair, I think that's what they are trying to do. I think that is the vision. But the breakdown of the cost is how much are you going to spend on the fabric of the building, and if I with my business experience, I would want to get those things in place first before you spend the money, not spend the money and then think, right, what are we going to do with this?
And the research we're going to do.
If we are refurbishing the building, the Architecture Centre, when Victoria Thornton run it, was such a fantastic place. They had blockbuster exhibitions, and the place was really lively. If that is what we're going to end up with, then that's fantastic. But it's not in Trafalgar Square. It's not in Shoreditch. You've got to get the footfall. Yeah. So I'd like to see more evidence of what is going to be done.
Definitely.
Well, that's not exactly the positive note that you were hoping to end on, but look, I think there is some positivity in this conversation.
No, I'm positive we'll get it right.
Good. And thank you so much for coming and spending time with us during this period when you're obviously very busy. John's going to be voting for you. I'm not a RIBA member, so I'm not going to be able to vote, but we're definitely supporting you. And thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.